Joining us today is Nick Oliver, Professor of Economic Geology, School of Earth and Environmental Sciences at James Cook University. He'll be speaking at IIR's Mining the IIR 2010 conference, which takes place on the 16th to 17th of November in Mount Isa. Hello Nick, thanks for joining us.
How are you, James?
First of all, can you explain what the current state of minerals exploration and research activity is in Queensland, and with specific reference to the Mount Isa region?
James, I guess I'll focus mostly on the Mount Isa region, but I guess the current state of R&D associated with minerals exploration is relatively low compared to, let's say, the last decades of activity. This is a function of several factors, not the least of which is the sort of up and down yo-yo cycle of the minerals and government and education sectors in the last few years. In Mount Isa, which has been the focus for sort of Queensland's geology research for many years due to its minerals wealth, James Cook University and several other universities around the country had a major project wind up in 2008. This is the Predictive Minerals Discovery Cooperative Research Centre. And it looked at a number of commodities right through the Mount Isa region and to some extent elsewhere in Queensland. And it represented a really substantial research component of those institutions that were involved. So that was particularly James Cook Uni, Monash University, Melbourne University, UWA, most notably. And those projects are pretty well wrapped up in 2008, as I said. So as a consequence of that, there has been a downturn simply because there was so much effort put into that over quite a long time. The exploration activity in Queensland, most people will know. I'm not really that qualified to talk about that, but exploration activity sort of reached the bottom of a trough a little while ago and has picked up rapidly since. And so the ground holdings in the Mount Isa block at the moment are quite high, and there is quite a lot of activity. Although at the moment, I guess there's not a huge amount of money, so there's a lot of activity, but not a great deal of new things happening at the moment, although there is a fair bit of ground moving around.
Can you give an insight into the minerals research and development that you've been involved with on behalf of James Cook University? The
type of R&D has focused really on big system scale stuff. So I guess in the sort of 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, the research was normally done by groups of relatively small numbers of individuals from JCU and from other universities. And this project I mentioned before, the Predictive Mineral Discovery CRC, it brought a big team approach into the science of understanding the economic geology in the Mount Isa district, and that allowed people to make some probably big inroads into areas that they wouldn't have been able to achieve themselves in smaller groups. And the types of things that were done, for example, were very, very big regional geophysical programs from the Geological Survey of Queensland and the Geoscience Australia, for example, were bolted into company research and bolted into university research in defined projects that would normally not be easy to define. And so a lot of really big ideas were sort of explored in that time, particularly with respect to copper. And not just around Mount Isa itself, but right across the whole of the Mount Isa block between Mount Isa and Cloncurry. And those types of minerals research and developments really boosted exploration efforts. They boosted R&D efforts. They boosted government involvement in projects. And really, there's a whole positive legacy of people that benefited from that experience that are out there now. Both still working in the Mount Isa block and elsewhere in Australia.
And what results have you achieved through your research, and what recommendations will you be making to the mining industry?
Some of the main results, I don't want to get too specific on the geology, but some of the results we achieved were things like understanding that the development of a particular mineral system, for example, copper, is not just a one-off event, and not just in academic sense. What this really means is that people had tended to focus on a very individual model for the genesis of a particular type of deposit, and what that failed to do was to recognise that there had been repeated stages of reworking of metals within the crust over hundreds of millions of years. And so what people have tended to do is sort of say, oh, well, this type of copper forms in this type of way, and this other type of copper forms in this other type of way, and they tend to perceive that there's no connection between them, and what we explored quite a lot was the extent to which early introductions of copper into the rocks during and soon after these rocks were formed was then progressively modified over the hundreds of million years subsequent history to ultimately form some of the accumulations that are being mined as copper deposits today. And that type of research, again, it's extremely multidisciplinary, requires a large input from a number of individuals, a number of teams, and I guess the big message there is that the team approach actually can produce both practical and long-standing geological outcomes that would normally not otherwise be available. In terms of recommendations to the mining industry, I guess some of these recommendations are difficult ones to undertake, and part of the problem is that there is an ongoing shortage of geologists in the industry and indeed in research at the moment. And so, the global financial crisis, everybody's heard about how Australia managed to sidestep a fair bit of that, largely due to the resources industry, and that's fairly true. I mean, there really hasn't been a time when geologists have been short of work for several years now, and particularly in the Mount Isa block. So the difficulty with making recommendations from a R&D perspective to the minerals industry at the moment is that the industry is absolutely flat-strapped, trying to keep production going, trying to keep exploration going. So we can make practical recommendations based on our sort of scientific outcomes, and those recommendations really focus on the ability of people to be able to juggle 3 or 4 models for the formation of a particular type of deposit without necessarily focusing on a single deposit model, because that's led to grief and a lack of sort of clear thinking in the past. And some examples, the discoveries of molybdenum by Ivanhoe around the Stara Selwyn district are testimony to the fact that there's still some surprises out there. And if you close your mind and focus on one commodity with one style of a commodity model for the formation of that type of deposit, then you're going to run into trouble.
You're presenting a paper at IIR's Mining the Isa Conference 2010, which takes place on the 16th to 17th of November in Mount Isa. What aspects will you be covering in your presentation?
I think the points we've already discussed, I'll be rounding out to some extent. So the more sort of social, political, etc. aspects of minerals R&D in the Mount Isa block. But the other things I will be covering is some of the more technical outcomes of the research of the predictive minerals discovery CRC in the Mount Isa district over the years, and not just from a JCU perspective, but from the perspective of a fair section of that group, based on all of the Mount Isa work that was done. So I'm hoping that not just geologists will be interested in it, there will be managers, directors, engineers, miners, etc. out there that hopefully will get some idea of the sort of breadth that is available through collaborative research, and that's the sort of thing that I'll be flagging.
And finally, how important do you think events like this are for the industry as a whole?
Well, I think they're very important. I guess the difficulty is it's a fairly competitive market for these types of events, and there's a fair bit of competition from professional societies, AusIMM, AIG, professional academic societies like the Geological Society of Australia, Society of Economic Geologists, etc., and different universities. They're all trying to run workshops or conferences or what have you, and it's obviously important for industry to try to keep abreast of the sort of current developments, but it's difficult to expect them to attend all of them. So taking a conference out to Mount Isa is a pretty good idea, because at least it means that you've got a potentially captive audience. So I guess the question is whether a specific focus like this for the duration and the cost of the conference captivates the size of audience you're after. I think there are people out there that like to come in and get a little taste of different flavours of the mining exploration development of a particular district, and I think that's the group that's probably going to be attending this conference in November. And there may well be some people that have never been exposed to the Mount Isa district that rock up to things like this just to get a feel for the level of activity.
Nick Oliver, many thanks for your time today.
No worries, James. Thank you very much.